Welcome to Deconversations, a rather excellent podcast if you're listening, and a webinar if you're watching, discussing all things related to medical devices decontamination. Brought to you by Dan Cole, the instrument maker, Matthew Pescott, entrepreneur and former Sterile Services manager, and Pavel de Sternberg-Stoilovsky, a research and development engineer.
Welcome to Ben and Matthias from Bora. Very excited to have you on Deconversations.
Morning.
So many thanks for joining us and good morning. We eventually got there after a few minor technical hitches. Just if you guys wouldn't mind introducing yourselves, and we'll do the same. So obviously we can get to know what one another does a bit better.
Hi, my name's Ben Sigmund. I'm one of the international sales managers at Bora Chemie. Coming up to my 11th anniversary at Bora on the 2nd of November. So I've been there a few years. Before that, was working at MediSafe down in Bishop Stortford. So I've been working in decontamination for a good few years on both capital and consumable equipment sides of the business.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And yourself, Matthias?
Yeah. So hello, everyone. My name is Matthias Buhmann. I'm working for Bora Chemie in Switzerland and as a scientific affairs manager for the medical part of the company. And I'm mainly dealing with input for R&D, clinical evaluations, help the medical field. And previously, I've worked in the academic field, and perhaps I can already go to the point what brought me into decontamination sciences. So I studied life sciences, which is basically chemistry and biology, and did a lot of research work on biofilms and adhesion to surfaces and antimicrobial materials and antibiotic resistant bacteria and the whole topic that the world is facing currently on when it comes to medical devices and implant and medical device associated infections. And I published quite some articles on these topics, and I realized that still a very academic topic, and it's difficult to move things in that field. And by moving over to a chemistry company that is working on improved reprocessing of medical devices and disinfection of medical devices, I believe that I can contribute in real life more for the patient safety and guarantee each patient a safe medical instrument or surgical instrument that is clean and properly disinfected.
Excellent. So you're taking your academic experience and applying it to solve, obviously, very real life issues and problems. Brilliant. Thank you. Matthew and Pavel, would you like to give us a bit of an intro, please?
Pavel, go on.
Okay, my name is Pablo de Sternberg-Stoilovsky, and I run Aseptium. Here we also deal with decontamination of surgical instruments, but we look mostly at the moment at mapping and evaluating the effectiveness of cleaning processes by making process change devices and doing a lot of research at the moment on comparing different types of processes, process parameters, and looking at ways to improve overall effectiveness of the entire cleaning process.
Okay, thank you, Pablo. Matthew.
Oh, hi guys. I'm Matthew Pescott. I run my own company, Pescott Solutions. I've been in business since '99. I've got a background in sterile services. I used to be a sterile services manager for my sins. Probably been in decontamination for over 30 years. So definitely showing me age.
Thanks, Matthew. And obviously, just to introduce myself briefly, so I'm Dan Cole. I'm the Managing Director of Surgical Holdings. We're surgical instrument and orthopedic implant manufacturer. It's a long heritage in my family, surgical instruments. And I also chair the ABHI surgical instrument group as well. But yeah, thanks. Obviously, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Our first international guest as well, which we're very excited at. And I think for us as well, you're also our first guest from industry. We've had people who generally are involved in sterile services, managing units and departments so far. So it puts a different spin on things. So yeah, it should be good. So we're going to just go into the questions. So I think we've got a bit of a background from Matthias as to how he ended up in decontamination. But Ben, you've said you've been in it for a number of years. Did you want to just give us a bit of an input for himself?
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing it now for about 18 years. Was my first job out of university was at MediSafe, and it was a job I didn't expect to be going for. I studied hotel management at university, and really thought that was the path for me. I really sort of quite enjoyed that up until the point I had to go and work in a hotel as a manager, and at that point I thought, no, I'm not doing this for the next 50 years, and so started having a nose round for alternatives. My sister was working for pharma company at the time, and she said about working for them was pretty good. And I thought, yeah, okay, that sounds interesting. I wrote to all the pharma companies for their graduate schemes one by one. They very politely told me to go and seek opportunity elsewhere. And there was a job in the local paper, in the Hertfordshire Mercury, of all the places. I never thought I'd find a job that I wanted as a graduate. Was for this small medical device manufacturer in Bishop Stortford, where second language was given as an advantage, fluent in German. And so, well, not pharma. I thought, okay, medical device industry, that sort of is roughly in the same ballpark. Let's go and have a look. And a couple of interviews later, they gave me the job. I thought, yeah, I'll stay for a couple of years and sort of make some mistakes and learn some bits and pieces, and then go and try something a bit different. But I've got to admit, it's kind of an addictive industry. And it was sort of it was clear to me back then the scope of this business and the potential to really do something and make some changes to people's lives. Because I saw this broad spectrum of being based in the UK at the time when HTM 2030 was in full flow. 15883 at that point was just a draft document. It hadn't been released yet. And so you sort of see this evolution of things and the way that sort of it was growing and changing. It was pretty appealing to be involved in that at the time.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
it is the reason it's important that we cover that, I think, and what we found is that we're really interested to find how people have got into such an exciting industry, and everyone we speak to is really, has been really passionate about their industry. So, no, thanks. It's good. I think it's good for people who are listening to see how they can also, go from what they're doing, whether they are involved academically, and move that on to being involved in a company like MediSafe that, as you say, was rapidly growing. So what, as a team, what are you most passionate about? Is there a sort of Bora ethos, or, is it an individual thing?
No, as a company, so we've I don't want this to become an advert for Bora, but we've got 4 different divisions, and the different divisions feed off each other. So we've got a life sciences, a medical, industrial, and a hygiene division. And it's with the industrial customers in particular, it's very much focused upon the cleaning outcome. So the customer will come to you with a particular material, and it will have a particular residue on it, and our guys in the lab then have to go and find a cleaning solution for that, and come up with a process, come up with a chemistry. So there's a lot of custom-made chemistry within the industrial division. We've sort of tried to transfer that as much as possible over to the medical world, and we do try to specialize. We don't want to be a broad brush. We really want to say to the customers, look, you've got this particular problem. Let's really almost, again, pardon the pun, but surgically find a solution to this. to this issue. Really sort of get down to the nitty gritty of what is your problem, what's causing it, and how we can resolve it. Not fudge it, and not to say, we can make a brief change there. No, really sort of get down to finding out exactly what that cause of the problem is, and coming up with an appropriate long-term solution for the customer.
Excellent.
You could also say that, I mean, even though different CSSDs reprocess almost the same surgical instruments, but yeah, still depends a lot on the surgeries that are being done, on the materials that are being used, on the water quality on the site, how the handling is being done. So I think there is still space for optimization among the different CSSDs, that you can get the perfect process for the perfect setting. So our approach is kind of to see what is the situation at the customer site and to optimize the process and to give him best performance possible under the circumstances.
Okay. So it sounds like a really personal approach to each solution, really bearing in mind the differences and nuances between sterile services, I suppose, departments across the world. Pablo, is that something you want to pick up on?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the things that, through the whole journey through the decontamination that I went through, especially with the advancements in surgical instruments that we see nowadays, there are so many different challenges that we have to almost look at individual basis, that having this sort of almost custom approach to processes. I'm not even talking about just the chemistry, because that is something that is not a viable option, but looking at the entire process and really making this process work for a particular site. And everywhere, if you look at social media, if we look at, for example, washer disinfector manufacturers, the goal is somehow to make the process super quick. And from your experience, there are sites that really need speed. There is no question about it. They suffer from the lack of space for more machines and so on. But there are others that don't have this problem whatsoever. And I think the aim of getting the right process for the right customer and really focus on the outcome, making sure that the instruments are properly clean, is absolutely the way forward.
Yeah, great. So in terms of processes and ensuring the quality of the processes, obviously, I would guess, Matthias, that's something that you're obviously heavily involved in, and ensuring the consistency. How is that sort of thing measured? And I can factor in my question as well that I had from an instrument perspective as well. So in a similar scenario where you've got a particular stainless steel that you've got to ensure is cleaned or can be cleaned, and that it won't deteriorate as a from a chemical contact perspective. How do you go about starting to deal with that, and to ensure that you have a robust process?
Yeah. I mean, I understand the problem of different soils that appear in practice in the hospital during normal surgeries, or, I mean, the question is always, what kind of soil do you have on the instruments, and how do you prove it's gone in the end of the day after the perfect process? And I mean, there are a lot of cleaning indicators in the market, and they always indicate if the process works correctly. So I rather call them process challenging devices, where you can control the process of if the washing, cleaning, disinfection process is working properly as it's supposed to work. And in the end of the way, you have to prove during the validation that the real in-life soiled instruments get clean, so that the soil on the instrument is gone and you can use process challenging devices to control the whole thing and to see if it correlates what you have with your process challenging device and what comes out at the validation. And of course, you can't
I have a question here, if I may, because this is a really interesting approach. How do you sort of correlate the work that you do in a laboratory, in controlled environment, in a way that you know how your machines behave, how your chemistries behave, and how you correlate that with people who are actually doing the validations in the field and they give you feedback? How does that work?
Yeah. So, of course, during development, you have to start from somewhere, and mostly, so I think it should be fine to talk about that point, that we first of all look at all kinds of different process challenging devices during the development, and also artificial soilings, different types of soils, how they are being cleaned in the laboratory just with the chemistry, with as little as possible mechanics. I mean, we develop chemistry, and we are not developing wash disinfectors, so we want to know the pure performance of the chemistry itself. And of course, there are a lot of other points involved, like foam, if the chemistry forms foam in a washer disinfector or not. It shouldn't, to maintain the high pressure of the washer disinfector, and a lot of different factors that are involved into the development of a chemistry, of a process chemical, like also material compatibility and so on. But these are other things. And if you just look at the cleaning itself, of course, you start with artificial soil or with reference soil, with blood. I mean, in practice, the cleaners are designed to remove the typical type of soil that appears during a surgery, which is mostly blood, but sometimes also via tissue, sometimes fat is involved, but there are also unknown factors that can show up, like residues of disinfectants, or from X-ray contrast agents, residues, what the chemistry per se is not initially designed for, but you have one chemistry that in practice should work with everything, with every kind of soil, and give perfect results. And in the end of the day, you have to see how it works together with the different types of washer disinfectors, with the different water qualities in the field, and with the different types of soil that show up during different surgeries in different hospitals and on different instruments, and prove that the instruments get clean in the end of the day. So after the development phase, we do a limited launch and roll out of our products and see how good do they perform in everyday life in different CSSDs around before we go to the market and before we feel confident that we can start with that chemistry. So
this is absolutely incredible to see how much work is actually involved in doing this, because on one hand you have the what Daniel alluded to, the material compatibility, and we know it's not only stainless steels that we have on our surgical instruments, but we have all sorts of sometimes even very exotic materials. We have titanium, we have electromechanical instruments that also have got different types of materials. So I can feel the pain of making sure that you know the chemical is optimized in such a way that there is no deterioration of those materials, and at the same time you have your primary objective of actually removing the soil from the instrument. So yeah, it's absolutely fantastic to see how that sort of lab work is then transferred into real life case studies.
Yeah, you got exactly the point. That, I mean, the cleaning power is the most important part of all for a cleaner, of course, but all the other tests that you have to do during development to see that is it stable for a long time, for enzymatic cleaners? Is the enzymatic activity maintained also under worst case conditions if the cleaner is exposed to heat, which can happen in a CSSD, and all the material compatibility tests about foam. We want to avoid foam. So yeah, so a lot of development behind these cleaners until we feel confident to bring them to the market. But yeah, I mean, the difficulty is still to have a standardized measure for cleanliness. So I mean, the EU standards go to the right direction, and there are different test soils and different limit values which can be acceptable. In the newest version of the 15883, there will be more concrete numbers, how much of carbohydrate residues on a surface can be accepted or how much protein. Of course, from our perspective, we aim for 0, that all the instruments are clean, but there are so many, after application of the chemistry alone, the whole process is so complex and all the factors that are involved, from manual preparation over the performance of the washer disinfector and unknown factors, like sometimes you don't get the real insights about the water quality in the CSSD. Sometimes things are not being communicated very frankly. If, for example, the hospital has problems with Legionella and they add chemicals to their water, that this also might impact the cleaning process overall. And yeah, that we
a good case study there. Obviously, I won't name the site in question, but it was a hospital got in contact with me and was asking about a particular problem that they had with the reprocessing devices. Their instruments were turning up or were coming out very dull. They'd lost that luster, that bright shininess. And it transpired that the hospital was adding silver nitrate to the water at source in the hospital, again to keep various bacteria at bay and whatnot. And CSSD had no idea and only found out once the impact of it had shown itself on their devices in CSSD. It was again just quite a fascinating little side story as to sort of things that people don't necessarily think about that can have an impact on the devices. I know I think it's in the state of Victoria in Australia, they add silicates to the water to protect the pipework in the city, in Melbourne itself, which is obviously not a problem for human consumption necessarily, but causes us issues with regards to instrument reprocessing and discoloration and the like. So there's certainly different things at play. Whenever you go to a hospital, it's never a straightforward one size fits all kind of solution.
Yeah, there was also another example once that we got stains on instruments where it was not clear where they came from, and by analyzing the instruments with electron microscopy and elemental analysis, we found out that there was a high sulfur amount on these instruments, and it turned out that the surgical room staff used skin disinfectant to soak the instruments after the surgery, and they were left in that disinfectant, and finally there were disinfectant residues introduced into the process. And of course the cleaners are designed for blood soil and human soil leftovers from surgery, but not for the disinfectant. Of course, it was partially removed, but there were some spots left. And after solving that issue in the complete process, the overall result was much better, and this problem was ruled out afterwards. So it's often not only about being able to remove the soil that usually appears on the instrument. It's also often about troubleshooting and looking at things you wouldn't expect for some
And this one particular thing is something that I absolutely love on a daily basis, is that sort of detective work to find out, especially when you have a case that it's not obvious from the first glance what is wrong, and you know that you have to dig a little bit deeper. So that's one of those things that really keeps me engaged on a daily basis to find out why are we even having that problem. So and I can imagine, Ben, that from your international perspective, that book of stories of different unexpected events is sort of grows gradually year by year.
It's over the last few years, it certainly has. You see things all over the world, and it's not just limited to countries with, let's say, less developed infrastructure in terms of CSSD reprocessing. We've seen things in Germany, Switzerland, Austria, countries that you would regard as being at the forefront of instrument reprocessing, that will also make you think, I'm not quite sure that that's how we should be doing things. It's a global thing. It is absolutely global. There's no question about it. We will see all manner of things wherever you go in the world.
Yeah, and sometimes it's really fascinating that you can just change tiny things within the reprocessing cycle and improve the results a lot and make reprocessing more safe for the patient at the end of the day. So, I mean, you get the feeling that your work is valuable because you make the surgery safer. It's very good.
It's one thing I was just thinking of. Obviously, you talk about these different situations that you've had, but you've got to really rely on consistency of quality of instruments as well, haven't you? Really, and not only that, ensuring these instruments where you're seeing different challenges that I suppose that they're intact, that the passivation on the steel isn't damaged, because obviously it's in most cases, I guess, dealing with stainless steel, it's got iron in it, so it's there's a heavy chance of it corroding as well if there's if the chemistries don't react quite correctly with the steel. So it must be hugely challenging to pinpoint like what the problem is. I mean, Matthew, obviously from your perspective over the years, that's and obviously from the chemistry perspective, you must have been faced with similar scenarios as well, wasn't you?
Yeah, I mean, I just thought of a story. I know Germany are quite keen on using alkaline detergents, especially quite aggressive detergents. And I remember having a conversation with Synthes, the implant manufacturer, being approached by the governing body of decontamination in Germany, and basically being told that they had to adapt their medical device to the chemistry. Because he was aware of my sort of link with enzymatics, he was hoping that would be an approach. So I think what we need to be doing is a borochemy type approach where the chemistry suits the medical device and not the other way round.
Yeah, so that's a very good point that you bring up. So, I mean, I believe there's huge improvements that could be made in the reprocessing if you wouldn't have the one-for-all chemistry. So over the last decades, I mean, for the last 20 or more years, there hasn't anything fundamentally changed in the way it's being reprocessed. So aluminum, titanium, stainless steel, it all ends up in the same baskets and is reprocessed with the same chemistry and the same washer disinfector. And of course, each medical device manufacturer has to assure that his medical device can be reprocessed and that it's compatible with the other medical devices that it's in contact with. So it's a two-sided thing. On the one hand, the implant or the the instrument manufacturer has to show that his instruments can be reprocessed with the common detergents. And on the other hand, we also have to prove that our detergents are compatible with the standard instruments. And so highly alkaline pH is not at all a problem for stainless steel. You can go very high with the pH and it would just be very efficiently cleaned. But the problem is that you, at the same time, also clean aluminum and titanium devices that are not as compatible with alkalinity. So you get a problem if you go too high with pH and temperature at the same time. So if there would be a shift towards separated reprocessing, you would have much more options to optimize the cleaning results in the processes. But I know that in practice it's currently not possible that every instrument from a surgery ends up in the same basket and it's already reprocessed together. Yeah, for me that's.
So what? Yeah. So Matthias, I mean, obviously that's it is the challenge is so broad, isn't it? Really, and it's just really understanding how, I suppose, when you're testing the devices, the stills, and making sure that they're compatible directly with the chemistries, that you're covering this broad spectrum. But it just seems a shame that I'm sure there is collaboration between instrument manufacturers and chemistry companies, but it doesn't seem to be particularly visible because it's always been sort of data I've been looking for and never really been able to find direct collaboration where, you know, it's been proven that X instrument has worked with certain chemistries, and obviously we do our own validation, you do your validation. So shouldn't the two come together a bit more, perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's also what we're trying to do, and that we are working on. And to some extent, it already works out quite well that we can consult the manufacturers of the instruments regarding the processes. I mean, they just have to prove that their instruments are possible to reprocess with a common process. But if they select a process that is not really relevant for the market, that's not usually in use, then the whole reprocessing instructions are not very customer friendly and relevant for the real life. So, I mean, they also they validate the reprocessing process as an example. They should be able to use a chemistry that is like an average chemistry that is being on the market and to show that it can be reprocessed exactly, for example, with a mildly alkaline detergent. And then as a customer or as a CSSD member, you can choose a chemistry that has the same properties, maybe of a different brand, and you can be sure, and you have to prove that the instrument getting clean in your process, but you don't have to use the same chemistry as the manufacturer suggests. So sometimes the medical device manufacturers are a bit too strict or more strict than needed in the recommendations of their chemistry. And then the head of the CSSD has big question marks on his face and wonders, how should I ever manage to reprocess this instrument with my processes? And that's often when questions come to us.
That's a good
Ben and Matthew, I wanted to pick up on this because I think that this is really interesting to explore this. Do you think that as an industry we are sort of getting ready to having the processes tailored to different types of instruments? Okay, we know already that we have cases like the Da Vinci robotic arms that they go through their own processes. Some ophthalmic instruments in some hospitals go through their own processes. Do you sort of see a push forward to make more and more of that?
Matthew, I'll let you take that one first.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, I mean, basically, I do accept some of the things that Matthias is saying. At the end of the day, there has to be a balance between the chemistries that are available and the instrument manufacturers ensuring that they design a device that can be cleaned. However, with medical devices becoming more sort of sophisticated, they're using a broader types of materials to make them. I'm sort of the view that if we can offer a chemistry that is very effective at cleaning, but has no compatibility issues. So say if we take, as you said, like aluminium or titanium, I think it's more aluminium is the issue. And then we modify a chemistry that is compatible with aluminium, but is also a very good cleaner for stainless steel, but doesn't need the aggressiveness of an alkaline, a strong alkaline detergent. I mean, we're also looking at handling and health and safety from a staff point of view. So if we can have a chemistry that is safe to use, but a very effective cleaner, but then can clean any type of instrument. And if we're going to take it to the next stage, something that's extremely environmentally friendly, because that's the goal now. Because I know some of the sort of compounds that are used in alkaline detergents are not terribly environmentally friendly. And it's always amazes me that I still see detergents with pictures of dead fish on them, which doesn't, to me, bode very well. So, well, that's me on my soapbox anyway. So.
Can I answer directly to that point? So, I mean, in the beginning, you mentioned this German regulation, and you referred to the Robert Koch Institute, the pH 10 recommendation, which popped up after all the prion topics. So in Germany, you have to basically reprocess with a pH higher than pH 10 to be compliant. And from my point of view, you don't need that high pH to receive good cleaning results. You can also go lower than pH 10 for good cleaning results. I mean, it's all a definition thing, what you call mildly alkaline or highly alkaline, where are the borders? But if you go with pH not too high, then your material compatibility towards aluminum is far better. And we managed to achieve a very good aluminum material compatibility at already this high pH, above pH 10, and excellent cleaning results in one product or in our cleaners that are being used. But if there wouldn't be this regulation and this demand from the market that you need to have this high pH, this would also give us as a chemistry manufacturer more options to develop new chemistry with different properties. And the other thing is, of course, with medical devices, the designers, the engineers that design the medical devices already pick the best material for the mechanical properties that are needed and that are possible to reprocess the best. So you wouldn't find certain types of plastics, of polymers in medical devices. Mostly they already choose the most compatible ones. And I think that's not really an issue right now. I think if I'm looking to the future, it's rather to achieve better compatibility with titanium and aluminum in the same time with stainless steel and good cleaning results, so that you can balance all of these points. And regarding safety of chemicals, they are all, so I can just speak for our company, probably they are all safe for the professional user. And you expect a professional user to work personal protective equipment. So you wear gloves, you wear goggles, and you are usually not in contact with a product for the machine. And if there are global harmonization symbols on it, they refer to the concentrate. If you have the bottle and you're in contact with the concentrate, that's only the exchange of the canister, one canister to the next one. So it's rather about minimizing the possibility that there might be an accident during the change of one canister to the next one. And one approach is already to use centralized dosing systems. I think that's very straightforward, that usually the stuff doesn't get into contact with the cleaners for too often. And the manual products, of course, there are then different demands for manual cleaner.
There was one thing that, sorry, Dan, one thing that Matthew picked up on is this sort of environmental impact. And Ben, I think from your perspective, do you actually get maybe more interest in the international market, people asking specifically about that aspect of chemicals? Is this something that comes up?
We're seeing a move. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a deciding factor at the moment. It's just something that people are starting to inquire about. Where we're seeing it being considered as part of tender specifications and things like that. But I certainly wouldn't say that it's got a huge amount of momentum behind it as yet. But I certainly see it going in that direction. We had more inquiries this year than we had last year, and we had more inquiries last year than we had the year before, as to sort of environmental impact and considerations that we make with our products. So absolutely. One of the things I wanted to come back to though was what Dan said earlier about collaboration between instrument manufacturers and detergent manufacturers. This is it's a tricky one, and it's one that's sort of plagued me for a number of years. We'll get, for an example, an inquiry out of a country, any country, doesn't matter where. And they'll say, right, I've been told by the instrument manufacturer that I need to use your chemistry to reprocess my devices. Okay, fine, brilliant. That's obviously great. We're over the moon that people are sort of recommending our products and things like that. But then when you find out that you've got to go through the whole registration process within a country where you've never sold a chemistry before, and that registration process may take a year, may take 18 months, depending on where you are. So it doesn't solve the customer's immediate need. It may be that the registration process costs far in excess of any potential revenue that you may get out of that marketplace. And then all of a sudden you have the commercial decision to make. What do you do under those circumstances? And does that then impact the ability for the instrument manufacturer to sell a device into that country? All of a sudden, is that then is by being that specific, is that causing an issue then to the instrument manufacturer to be able to, like I say, be able to sell their devices into such a country, because all of a sudden the CSSD manager says, sorry, I can't reprocess this effectively. We're going to have to walk away from the sale, and then that impacts the manufacturer's ability to sell their products and make money. What we have seen as well from the manufacturers, and we're talking about huge manufacturers, the likes of Olympus and Karl Storz, is that they have essentially closed their books now on doing specific chemistry tests, because they had everyone knocking on their doors saying, we want to do a test with your devices now, chemistry, and it was just getting so extremely expensive to them. They both just like to say, sorry guys, enough's enough. We can't do this anymore. We're going to issue more generic and general cleaning, reprocessing information, and not. We just simply haven't got the resources to be able to test all the chemical manufacturers that are sort of springing up around the world in compatibility with our devices. And so there are certain challenges on that front. And it's a tricky one to know how really the best way to go about getting an answer to everyone is, because obviously at the end of the day, the one who suffers is probably overdoing it a little bit, but the one who then has a problem to solve is the end user. They want to use a device, they want to use a chemistry. How can they bring those two together when regulation somewhere or a very, very serious commercial aspect has to be considered? It's a real tricky balancing act. No question about it.
I
can imagine.
We're on the instrument side of things seeing a lot as well is that, you know, that challenge in reverse, if you like, you're going into countries and with the regulations changing, of course, it's all got to be weighed up, isn't it? The cost versus the benefit. So you're going to see potentially patients missing out on, you know, indirectly good products coming into the marketplace for those very reasons. So yeah, I don't think it's necessarily a problem that's well known outside of the industry, you know, to the end users, that you are going to be faced with this more and more so when regulation comes in.
Could I comment in between?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, on the sorry for regarding the environmental compatibility of products, of cleaners, and I mean regulations accordingly. I think it's very good if there are decent regulations regarding what chemicals are allowed to be used and which should disappear from the market. And I think that's part of the European Chemicals Agency, the ECHA, and the REACH regulations, where a lot of changes happened in the last couple of years, where, for example, complexing agents to remove water hardness had to be exchanged because of the biodegradability. So I think it's very important that the products are able to be degraded in the wastewater treatment plant properly, and that they don't sneak through. And regarding wastewater, I rather see the problems different at a different point, not really at chemicals that get in there and are being degraded easily. In most of the cases, it's rather about substances that are not being degraded in the wastewater treatment plant. So, I mean, if you think about all the drugs that are being used by patients, about chemotherapy, hormone active substances that are being generated and flushed down the toilet, or contraceptive pills, that's mostly not really degraded in the wastewater treatment plant, ends up in the drinking water, in the system, in the nature, and there are severe impacts on the ecosystem. So I think also needs going hand in hand between wastewater treatment and chemical industry. And I think there are some improvements being made, and by the regulations, we also have to assure that our products are of good biological compatibility. On the one hand, with the patient, on the other hand, also chemicals have to be picked by their biodegradability. So if you have two options, then you choose the one that is ecologically better than the other one, out of toxicity considerations.
Yeah. One thing that I really wanted to go back to, because Matthias, you were talking about optimization, and I was sort of hoping that you'd be able to sort of maybe bring up a story or a case study where you've seen a really good example of how the entire process, not only the stuff that happens in the washer disinfector, but the whole thing was actually thought through and produced a really good result. Can you sort of bring up something that you've been perhaps working on recently to demonstrate that concept of optimizing the entire process?
I think I would forward this question to Ben, who is more directly at the markets.
Okay.
And can report on a certain case study where the manual pre-cleaning was fairly reduced,
Yeah,
right?
it's there are a few different approaches that we take. There was sort of links a little bit loosely with one of the points that was discussed earlier about optimization of cycles and things like that, and we're now looking at, everyone wants to have a shorter wash cycle, and we're shaving off 30 seconds here, 2 minutes there, but we're forgetting that perhaps the instruments are sitting outside the OR for 2 hours after the operation. And so our view has always been to say, right, let's not just look at individual aspects of the process. Let's look at the whole cycle, i.e. from the moment the instruments leave the OR to the point they get back to them. And if all of a sudden we can say, right, we can help improve efficiency within CSSD to the point that personnel have more free time available, that they can go and collect instruments on a more frequent basis, that all of a sudden that need to save 2 minutes here, 2 minutes there in in the CSSD is completely eradicated, because we've saved half an hour, 2 hours, whatever, by getting the instruments back from the OR immediately after the process has ended. So we've done quite a lot of work in around about 50 or 60 hospitals across Germany, whereby essentially what we've managed to do is to more or less eradicate manual pre-cleaning. There are exceptions to that rule, so heavily soiled orthopedics, intuitive endo-wrist devices. Let's see, what else would there be on that list? Probably some sort of dithermies and things like that, where you would need to still have some sort of manual intervention. But essentially, we've been able to optimize the processes within CSSD as a whole, to the point that instruments can come back from OR, dismantled, put directly into the washer disinfector, come out the other side spotlessly clean, of course, and can then go on to being packed, sterilized, and sent off for use in the next operation. In doing this, we've helped the hospitals to essentially reallocate resources. So whereas they may have had multiple people working on the dirty side of CSSD, which everyone hates anyway, we've now been able to reduce that personnel number down to much lower levels, and those staff who had previously been working on the dirty side are free to do other tasks. Our idea is that the instruments, obviously, when they come back from the theatres, are at their most dangerous. They are contaminated with, we assume we know, but we don't always know with what. So we want to reduce the amount of exposure and risk to the staff. Let the machines do the work. That is what they are there for. And then we have we can allocate the human capital to doing things that only human beings can do at the moment. And that's quite key for us. I spoke with one of our senior engineers in prep for this podcast, and he gave me a quite incredible story. That it was one of his customers, one of his hospitals in Germany, and they had a series of speculum left over the weekend in the containers. So basically from Friday night till Monday morning. And this was a repeated and recurrent problem. And they were obviously, Monday morning when the CSSD staff came in, you can only begin to imagine what they were faced with, trying to reprocess those. And so we developed a process for them that, again, meant even on Monday morning, the staff could come in and just put them straight through the washer disinfector without having to do any manual intervention whatsoever. Now, this is quite focused. It is quite niche, let's say, in its application, and it is quite an intensive process. But the point is that it is possible, and in setting it up, you may have a few hours work to check the parameters, make sure that it works, etc., etc., etc. But in terms of disruption, long term, there is next to none. The staff don't notice any real difference. They put the instruments into the washer, they press the start button, it runs its process, and that's it. So there is an initial setup time that we need to invest in, and a little bit of detective work to really sort of understand what happens within the hospital. But if we're willing to take that time at the beginning, we can really save huge amounts of time and resources in the long term, simply by cutting out manual cleaning. We're a chemical manufacturer. We don't necessarily want you to use less chemistry, but we are promoting such an idea because we want to say, look, we want you to be more efficient. So the amount of water that you're saving, Matthew, to address your issue, we're pumping less chemistry down the sinks than we would have done previously. And as I said, we're reducing staff to or exposure to potential risk. So again, the whole thing is very, very Swiss. It's about efficiency. It's about getting it done the right way first time.
I've got a question here because this is a fascinating case. Is how do you go with the concept of making sure that the staff in the hospital is also on board with this idea? Because at the end of the day, they have to select the right cycle with the right type of instruments being loaded. How do you get them on board with that sort of philosophy?
Okay. The first thing that obviously, like I said, we have to reassure them is that this is not to replace their roles. We want to make their life easier. That's the first part of it. The second aspect is, like you say, how do we ensure that they're doing the right thing? And we had an issue in one hospital where we set up 2 cycles. We set up 2 different program options, and they kept going for the more intensive one, which was designed for, let's say, like the speculum case. And the hospital in the end had to say, look, we're spending a little more than we would like here. How do we go about addressing this? And in the end, we had to just say, okay, look, we'll take that program out of the equation. And we just left them with one process. That one process there would more or less fit all. Now, again, doesn't apply to every hospital. We do tend to customize it. Again, Matthias, I can see you're busting a gut to say something. give me just one more second to
bring up so
say
many points.
And it really is a question of us, going to the hospital and seeing really what works for them. We've got in the markets where we work directly, which is Germany, Austria, Switzerland, we've got more engineers than we have salesmen. We send the engineers out and spend more time with the hospitals, working on their processes, monitoring them, adapting them when necessary. And it's the engineers who are really doing the work at the, I hate to use that cliched phrase, but at the coal face, ensuring that the customers have got outcomes that work for them.
Ben, I think, it's excellent case studies and examples you've run through there. I think we've probably got time for one more point that Matthias was keen to say, and then we'll close, I think. But it's really, really excellent and interesting. But Matthias, please.
I just wanted to catch up on this individualized processes according to the problems that you have, like the specular case. And the human error maybe that showed up after the staff selected the wrong program. I mean, it would be, of course, great to have a lot of processes that are specialized for the different types of soil and instruments. But the problem in the market currently is that you have to validate all of these processes, and it means a lot of costs. So it's a lot about the whole way reprocessing instruments is being validated, and how often you have to validate the process, how many repetitions, when can you be safe that the process works out, and that's a problem that you still need as little as possible processes to serve all the needs, and ideally, of course, you would just put everything into one washer disinfector and just put the button that no one can make any mistake anymore. But I think in the future, if I'm just imagining and dreaming, everything might be more automized, and you have to reduce all the points where human errors can be made. And the more things are being automated, the easier things will be, and the safer things will be, and the more options you have to use individualized processes for individual challenges. So perhaps it's good with the whole change to the MDR and all this unique device identification codes for each device, and maybe RFID technology, that the sorting of the instruments will be easier, that the processes might be selected automatically, that each basket goes to the right washer disinfector in future with the right program, and that maybe validation costs can be kept at a reasonable level. So these are all challenges in the moment to bring up innovation.
Excellent point in sort of looking at further ways we can automate it, because as you're absolutely right. When we automate that part of the process, we sort of reduce the risk of just simply causing errors by human error. And I think that there's also one aspect over here that Daniel is been advocating for years now, is looking at bespoke baskets for particular instruments that are tailored, so you cannot really swap them for something else, and that also takes you that one step closer to making sure that you know what is loaded in the machine, organizing your throughput through the machines in such a way that it becomes less risky to reprocess. So you don't have this random collection of sets, but you just know exactly what's going through it, so you can then run the correct program through it. So yeah, altogether, yeah, I think future is bright for the automation of processes, at least.
Yeah, again, sorry, Daniel, go ahead.
Yeah, go on, Ben.
No, it's a little bit of an extension, but Pablo's just reminded me of something else that sort of that I wanted to get off my chest. That I wanted to say.
You're in a safe space, Ben. It's fine.
We're all friends here.
Is your family ready for it?
Well, that's a very good question. With like I said, with regards of how we reallocate the human capital within CSSD, and it's that the cost of, let's say, an incomplete set or a dirty instrument to the hospital is huge, because if surgery is cancelled, postponed, delayed, whatever else it may be, the knock-on effect is massive. It's that ultimate butterfly effect moment. That little speck of dirt or that little missing device can have huge ramifications for multiple families and the hospital's smooth running. And so being able to say, right, we can then allocate more people to being able to check and ensure we're getting that bit right, because we've got confidence in our machine-based processes, is absolutely key, I think, to being able to make processes in hospitals much more efficient. Again, without an effective running CSSD, the rest of the thing is really in big trouble. Let's face it. But that's me.
Great. Guys, it's been a really excellent and insightful conversation, should I say? Particularly for me, because it's not, I don't really know too much about the chemistry side of things. So hearing from the other side of the fence, is really, as I say, really insightful, and also gets you thinking about other projects and issues and things in the future that need to be solved. But thank you very much for your time, for coming on and chatting with us. And I'm sure we could pick up in the future again. I think sounds like there's subject matter to talk about. But we look forward to speaking to you again in future.
No, brilliant.
Absolutely, it was an excellent insight, and thank you very much to all of you for sort of joining us here. And what Daniel said, we've already touched on such a number of different aspects that are critical to the proper operation of sterile services, that I'm sure that we'll try to organize another meeting with you, so we can go slightly more in depth into those. So thank you very much.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Brilliant.
You have been listening to Deconversations. Join us soon for new episodes.